Sequence is a series of touch points, could be across email, LinkedIn, phone, that help you engage a prospect. And where most people are going wrong is they're still stuck in the old way of doing sequences. 5, 10, 15 years ago, the sequence where you have 8 emails, 8 phone calls, and a bunch of LinkedIn steps over the course of anywhere from 1 to 2 months was the kind of usual standard. So a lot of touch points, 20 plus touch points in a short period of time. Once you start sending more than 3 or 4 emails, your response rates dip dramatically. If you keep sending people emails and they're not responding, you run the risk of getting spam blocked a lot more. At a certain point, people are going to block your email. If you're trying to do that many touch points, especially over email, what do you really have to say after the 3rd or 4th email? Most people don't have that complex of a product or that much to say. There's only so many ways you can describe your value proposition, so many things you can research. And so you start running out of things to say, which is why those response rates are so low after the 3rd or 4th email. And that's ultimately what I see wrong with sequences today. My recommendation in terms of what to do instead, and this is based on currently running over 15 clients' email campaigns and a lot of different testing. And what I see works best is 3 or 4 email sequences. Typically 4 emails, 2 threads. So you have your first email, which is where most of your research and personalization goes. You have a follow-up email in that thread, which is to provide additional context to what you were saying in the first email, along with some sort of offering, whether that be an image, a video, case study, etc. And then you start that over again a week later. So the sequence is 2 weeks long with another thread and then another bump in that thread. So 4 emails total. And this is done over the course of 2 weeks. You can also layer in phone calls and LinkedIn steps as well. And the reason why I like a shorter sequence is because I want to hit them with good personalization, good value up front. If they're not responding, I'm going to assume it's not relevant at the moment. The first email is the most important. That's where I'd put most of your energy into A/B testing, changing it up, because by far you're going to get your most responses from your first email. And so the structure, it's nothing crazy unique. For the most part, it typically follows 4 sentences. The first one is where I'm including my research, whatever sort of signals or triggers I found that enticed me to reach out in the first place. The second sentence is a problem hypothesis. So based on that research, I'm including what potential problems I think they might have. The third sentence is my value proposition with social proof. Based on whatever problems I think they have, how do I think we can solve that problem? I try my best to explain that in the customer's language, or using keywords that a customer would say in terms of how that problem is solved. And then the 4th sentence is a call to action. Now with my very first email, I don't want my call to action to be interest-based. For example, would you be open to learning more? Or time-based. For example, do you want to meet next Friday at 1 p.m.? And the reason why is because most cold emails that you receive, 99% of them are all saying that exact same call to action. And so what I want to do is provide a resource that will help them with the problem I hypothesized on. So a very common example of this is take your expertise and put it into a checklist. I was working with an event software, for example, and helping them run their cold email campaigns. We put together a checklist of different things you can do to run successful events and generate more leads from those events. So our call to action would be, hey, we put together a 10-step checklist on how to run more successful events. Companies like X, Y, and Z use this process. Do you want me to send that over? And that way you're building trust because you're not asking for their time immediately. And then on your second email, your third email, your fourth email, you can follow up and go for those appointments, go for interest-based call to actions, etc. But that's how I approach my very first email in a sequence. Follow-up emails, I just like to call them context emails because they serve 2 purposes. The first purpose is to just give your first email another chance at being seen, because ideally you put some time into personalizing it. But then the second purpose is to provide more context to that problem. So you want to keep your first email relatively brief. You don't want to put too much information about how you solve that problem. But your second email is where you'll provide more context as to how you solve it. This might come in the form of a customer testimonial, so just explaining how you helped another customer, giving more details on how your platform works. That could be an image explaining how the platform works. That could be a short video explaining how it works. Whatever form, whatever method you're using, whether it's image, video, GIF, just text, case studies, etc. The only goal is to just provide more context as to how you solve that problem. And then in general, that second email is much shorter. So usually like 2 sentences, maybe 3. Personally, I think subject lines are very overrated. Open rate data is very skewed. It's never 100% accurate, so you never really know how much your emails are getting opened or not. But when it comes to subject lines, it's nothing crazy. I just like to follow the standard best practices, which is 1 to 3 words, keep it very vague. Just take your email, summarize it in the most boring way possible in 3 words, make it look internal, and pretty much do everything that's the opposite of a marketing email. But don't spend too much time working on your subject lines. Just follow those simple best practices, test out a couple different ones, and stick to the one that works best. For your second thread, you really want to follow the exact same framework for emails 1 and 2, but in the second thread, you want to try to find new research and a new problem. So ideally, you lead with your most relevant signal or trigger that you found in the most relevant problem. The second thread, you want to find a new potential problem, a new potential thing to research. Sometimes you might not have that. Sometimes you have a very straightforward product. You don't solve a ton of problems. There's not too many ways you can describe it. What I would do in that case is just have a third email that's in that same thread that's following up, asking if there's somebody better to speak to at that organization about that potential problem. One way you can do that a little better is by actually finding somebody and saying, hey, do you think so-and-so's name might be a better person to speak to about this? I wasn't sure if you manage this or if that would be in their wheelhouse. So last follow-up, again, follows the same framework as the second second follow-up in the sequence where you're just trying to provide more context. Let's say in your second follow-up, you put an image, maybe in your last follow-up this time include a video or a testimonial. Just change up the content a little bit. The framework is still the exact same where you're just trying to provide more context as to how you solve that problem. My version of a breakup email is asking if there's somebody better to speak to. I'd say try them out for yourself. As with anything when it comes to cold email, you only know if it works if you try it for yourself. I've seen a lot of good cold email rules be broken and be successful. So try breakup emails if you want, but I haven't seen too much success with them. So if you're gonna layer on calls, I would typically do anywhere from 3 to 5 calls. And the most important thing you wanna listen for is that when you're making those calls, are they going to mobile numbers that are actually ringing through and you're hearing a voicemail? For example, if you're calling numbers that are immediately hanging up, it's happened the first 2 or 3 times, you're gonna have a lot of diminishing returns at that point because high chance they're not gonna pick up anyways. Or if you're calling through a mobile number that you can't even confirm is theirs, you're not hearing them in the voicemail. And that's why having verified phone number data is extremely important. Some tools will let you automatically push leads into a new sequence after several months. It just depends on the tool you're using, but I prefer to just set manual reminders and retarget those leads later on. If you want to include LinkedIn steps in your sequence, there's a few ways you can go about doing this. The truth is, if you're not connected with them, if you can't get through that initial connection request, there's not much you can do. Yes, you can send them in-mails. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of in-mails. I haven't seen them work that well. But when it comes to LinkedIn connection requests, I typically just do a blank connect unless I have something very relevant to say in the message. 9 times out of 10, when somebody's including a message in a connection request, it looks very salesy, so I try to avoid it. But then the next thing you want to do is you can use LinkedIn automation tools to notify you when you got a profile view from somebody you're emailing or immediately after they accept your connection request. So you can set up automations that will trigger an email to go out or trigger a call task for you immediately when somebody accepts your connection request, views your profile, or something similar. So I more so use LinkedIn as not a rigid set of steps to do, but more so a way to check for potential engagement and use that as a signal to send another email or make another call. So in terms of nurturing prospects and retargeting them if they haven't responded to a sequence, the way I do this is I set a manual step at the end of the sequence that says to check for the people who didn't bounce, block, or respond to my email. And ideally the ones who really opened and clicked, but you can take all the leads who just haven't responded or blocked your email yet, and then re-engage them 2 months later. So it's really simple. You just either whatever software you're using, I like to just download that list as a CSV and then set a reminder to 2 months later, re-verify the emails, make sure that nobody's left the company and they're still verified emails, and then put them into a new sequence. Outbound is all about timing, and so you may have just not caught them at the right time. And then I'm gonna re-engage them a couple months later, same format, 3 to 4 emails, but just different content. And so if it's a good lead, if it's a good account you wanna go after, keep re-engaging them every few months, but don't just blow them up with a ton of emails right away. That's the most effective sequence I've seen. It's gonna dramatically reduce your spam blocks, and it'll keep your response rate much higher because you're not sending as many emails.